Hello. Probably a little bit more than 5.5 minutes, like 5:46 or so. And I'm a humanist, so I have notes. I apologize for that, but I'll try to read super engagingly. So there's a great deal of important work at this intersection of inclusivity and technology. And among those key areas are accessibility and assistive technology. I'm relatively new to this terrain, and I actually thought it would be best for me to share a particular approach to using technology, and then conclude by addressing this slippery term, technology, which I can't resist because I'm a media theorist. And hopefully it'll indicate something about how technology really is process, and it's not zeros and ones, and that it's actually accessible, not forbidding. It can be made so, at least. So the approach that I want to share is called communal inquiry. This name is inspired by the pragmatist notions of communities of inquiry, and also the kind of invigorating proposition of communal luxury that we get from the Paris Commune. In a teaching context, communal, in my mind, refers to an idea of the commons, that there's shared resources of potential use. And this kind of inquiry, communal inquiry, it tends to involve learners learning through building and analyzing collections of stuff. And this is typically images, websites, quotations, or other things, frequently in a digital format. And this can take place at really very different scales, from 10 minutes to 10 days to 10 weeks. You can do different scales of communal inquiry, in my view. So an example will help. Imagine a hypothetical course on the history of visual media, about 60 people. It's a few weeks into the course, and we need to learn about the daguerreotype, which is one of the earliest forms of photography. And we need to better understand media historical continuity and change. That's what I want to get at. Rather than give a long lecture in this class, I decided to split the session between a preparatory presentation and a communal inquiry exercise. So for the first 30 minutes, I lay the groundwork. Maybe I share about the process of the daguerreotype. Maybe I share this amazing lithograph from 1839 called Daguerreotype Mania. This lithograph reveals, on the one hand, long-standing anxieties about the pervasiveness of images from the very beginning of photography. On the other hand, at its heart are photographs that are, unlike digital ones, singular and very slow, cumbersome in a way. So I've prepped the students for the exercise, and then I give them a prompt, let's say with the final hour of the course. Working in pairs, develop and pitch a juxtaposition, and the juxtaposition should be, on the one hand, a daguerreotype, on the other hand, a contemporary digital image that will somehow help us think together about continuity and change in the history of visual media. So what do students then do? Well, they search databases that I give them, perhaps this one or any number of others. I kind of seed them with databases, not just Google Images. Then they can use a plugin for Canvas that's pretty nifty called SweetC, where they can upload and share what they discover, individual things that they discover, and annotate them. And then they can use either this thing within SweetC called a whiteboard to create the juxtaposition, so it all lives within the course website, or they might use something like Google Slides or something else that they're familiar with. They could even, in an analog form of this, just post it on the wall, whatever they find, if they draw it or whatever. It doesn't have to just be images you find online. So the session concludes with presentations and discussion, maybe in small group forms, maybe in a larger group form. It really depends on what's the best process, and we've heard a lot about the kind of rhythms of a course today that can be effective for inclusive teaching. In terms of the course content, I imagine many good things would come of this. For example, I would imagine an inevitable cat reference, which I think of as the ongoing dialectic between cat and camera. On the other hand, I could imagine, more robust, although there's a lot to be mined here, but more robust questions, for example, about the shifting roles of visual media in social movements. And I think, for example, of a juxtaposition that might start with this 1848 image of a Chartist gathering in the UK. Now, in terms of inclusivity, I anticipate, for one, that projects or assignments like this, these kinds of uses of technology, will include an array of perspectives and backgrounds based on what is gathered. So what students choose to share, how they choose to share, they can infuse their selections and their framings of those selections with cultural, personal, and idiosyncratic relevance, right? There might be reduced barriers to participation, which we've heard some about already. I think of communal inquiry as giving time to think. It tends to obviate the tendency for certain voices to dominate conversation, which is crucial. And then it places student contributions on equal footing. There they all are together in our shared archive. Students can also see their contributions in a larger context, very concretely. And they can trade ideas and encounter peer experiences, peer intelligences, and I would say also peer struggles. The instructor, and I would say students as well, can amplify students' contributions that are sitting there waiting to be amplified, waiting to be referred to in the moment or in later sessions. It creates this kind of database of possibility. And then we also have to acknowledge that there are shortcomings, exclusions, and failures with these kinds of assignments. And I think from an inclusivity perspective, one has to welcome this fact and know it. On the one hand, you got to be ready to respond, maybe on the fly or maybe after the fact, to deal with certain exclusions. I could imagine, for example, students feeling as though this compelled them to share something from their own experience when they didn't want to. Alternatively, these kinds of assignments, maybe especially the one I've just shared, might favor a certain type of learner, like a visual learner, or someone who has research skills at the ready, or someone who has tech skills at the ready. So I would be very conscious of how to deal with these while also wanting students to help each other. So we have to be fully conscious of these possibilities. But I think that from an inclusivity perspective, there's always a quantum of imperfection in any kind of assignment. Just like any collection isn't exhaustive or total, no inclusive assignment is exhaustive or total of all the perspectives in the classroom. And I think actually saying that out loud to the students can do a lot, in my experience. So this all leads me to one final thought, and then this will be the last of the flash presentations. So I don't want to leave the impression that inclusive uses of technology begin and end with computational devices. In fact, I would argue that the chair you're sitting in is as technological as the server in Sweden that's logging your location right now. Maybe we can best promote inclusivity when we cultivate an inclusive understanding of this thing we call technology. So as disability activists and scholars encourage us to do, we can continually ask, how does this particular use of technology impact who and what gets to matter, whether in this particular context or in the world more broadly? So I think we should avoid teaching occasioned uses of the latest and greatest technologies. I think that's the kind of the model that the people selling us stuff would want us to have. We should instead find our way towards critical and intentional tool-enriched teaching and learning. And so I think together with our students, we can continually explore how given technologies and uses of technologies help or hinder our shared project, which I think is effective, inclusive, and I would say vivid classrooms. Thank you.